the title of this show that we put on YouTube, at least, is "The War Drags On." And Micah, I'm just going to jump right into that because I think it should be the lead story pretty much everywhere. And it was a new report coming out from the Washington Post. You know, I'm kind of always skeptical of the Washington Post in some ways because for those who've done their homework and understand going back to the 60s and 70s, the COINTELPRO hearings, the church hearings where we found out that different media like the Associated Press, New York Times, and the Washington Post were working directly with intelligence agencies at the time. So, you know, always good to take things with a grain of salt coming from there. And a lot of times, what we've talked before, Mike, about the idea of kind of official leaks that are welcomed or even encouraged or wanted by the government in some ways. The Washington Post, what is now already being called the Afghan Papers, confidential documents which they obtained, thousands of documents which they say reveal that U.S. officials failed to tell the truth about the war in Afghanistan for years. That, like many of us have seen and others have said from both the military and civilian life, that the war in Afghanistan has been a failure and continues to be a failure and based on lies. And now we have the...
But it's a very long failure. The longest failure ever, right? For America, right? I mean, as far as undeclared crazy wars that we don't even know why we're there anymore. Sorry.
No, you're right. I mean, and that's an important point to make because...
some civilians were just last week's show. We had to talk about civilians that were drone bombed, and at first the military said we got nothing but terrorists, and then of course they recant that later and say, oh well, it was civilians and no known terrorists. And then maybe a couple of weeks earlier we had an American service member that was killed. So I mean, Americans are dying in this war. Afghan civilians are dying in this war, and I'm not exactly sure. I mean, I know we're talking about lithium and opium and what else? Natural gas and
all sorts of resources, and that's what I posted on my Facebook page this morning. Is that this is not about keeping anybody safe. Hopefully, nobody still buys that or believes that. This is about this is about resources. This is about money. This is about control of that region, and it has been for a long time. For centuries, people have been trying to control that part of the world, and definitely it has a lot to do with oil. There's diamonds come into play, gold, like say in Libya, and other places. The banks, the banks don't like it when countries start saying they're going to opt out of their central banking system and start, creating a new currency or trading outside the dollar. So there's a lot of things going on here. But what I think is important, as Micah just noted, is that this is America's longest war. It's not an official declared war or anything of that capacity. It's just going in, 9/11, we're going to go into Afghanistan for one reason or another.
They have too much on the line to declare war, right?
And so there's 2,500 dead Americans. That's the number that we've been put out. Thousands of wounded Americans, reported over 1 million dead Iraqis as a result of this same, global war on terror, not to mention Afghan civilians that have been...
$1 trillion.
Millions and trillions of dollars going towards this, just the destruction of the environment over there, the destruction of the people, not to mention creating new generations of people who are going to hate America or believe that this is what America represents. And the other thing that should be, remembered about this is that these wars wouldn't have been able to happen without the media, the complicit and compliant media playing their role. I mean, we know that these mainstream media outlets, these same outlets, sold the American people into the lies of weapons of mass destruction and the lies of the war on terror in the days after 9/11. And they have done so unquestionably, even up to, we're going to get into some updates on the Syrian whistleblower that we've been talking about in recent weeks. That's another case where
more contractors have died in Afghanistan than troops.
More contractors
than troops.
Well, I mean, that's kind of, I think, also the nature of war shifting over to private contractors and, private military contractors. But the point is, this whole thing is just a disastrous story. And go over to CNN.com or don't. I'll do it for you. And you'd have to scroll down at least, midway down to the page, right around the celebrity news, to find a little story about what the Washington Post revealed this morning. And again, this should be, I think, the biggest story of the day. Instead, we're getting round-the-clock coverage of continuous impeachment. Donald Trump is a horrible person, yada, yada, yada. Now, again, I don't want to justify or excuse Trump in any way. Like I said earlier, we found out a president's corrupt. What else is new?
Yeah,
I mean, it's not a personal preference for Trump in any way.
At this point, right?
No. And the other thing that's sad is that people, the fact that I think this isn't not only mainstream news, but that people aren't, it's the first day, right? So let's see how things go. But there aren't people marching in the streets, like, say, in the 60s, 70s, or even 10 years ago, 15 years ago, saying, oh my God, here we have the documented proof that military officials, generals and people in charge were lying and knew that the war was a failure and continued lying, putting out fake forecasts that basically made it sound like we're doing better than we are, when they really have no idea what the hell they're doing. And I mean, that people should be raising awareness, civil disobedience, mass protest. Not that that's the final answer, but just something.
Look how long it's been. 19 years into it, and just recently, a media outlet was able to demonstrate some of this through, and they did had a 3-year court battle, the Washington Post and others, to get some information out about this, about senior U.S. officials that were failing to tell us the truth about the war in Afghanistan, like you're speaking about, and making rosy pronouncements, and they knew these pronouncements would be false, and hiding unmistakable evidence that the war had become unwinnable. One thing I'd like to say about that is, that sounds really serious, right, and everything, but wait, why do we care about a war only if it's unwinnable? And you get what I'm saying here? No, seriously. Like, all of a sudden, we're going to have a different outlook just because it's not rosy? Maybe we should have had questions from the beginning. I think some of us did, right? But it turns out this is based on 2,000 pages and 428 interviews with American officials, and these documents expose 2 disturbing key themes. One, the U.S. had no clue what it was doing in Afghanistan, and even worse, government officials lied. Imagine that, like we were just saying, to voters every step of the way.
I'm just blown away. I'm so surprised. But, I mean, I think it is overall good news that this is coming out. Like I said, we can kind of get into the weeds of like, oh, is this a purposeful leak? Is there some other ulterior motive or purpose? I mean, they could just be testing waters. Look, we just got a huge document leak proving that you're being lied to again about the war. And Americans are like, hey, what time's American Idol? Or what time's the impeachment start? Or whatever else. I don't know what's popular right now. Maybe American Idol was last decade. I think it's the Voice now. Micah, do you guys hear that sound? Micah is drinking a soda live on the radio.
They had these. They sent them
you didn't
to
hear
the
that
station.
From me.
We're really kind of interested because, somebody sent these here. But